talk about those situations. Like, how do you mentally cope when you're so frustrated that you just want to... You have to just calm down and like keep trying to think logically, actually.
Well, I guess the first is noticing that you're in that state where you go...
Sometimes people are like, they stutter and they're like, and they're like, use your words.
Right. So, while I love that, sometimes saying use your words to people in that moment becomes a pouring fuel on the fire situation. Mm-hmm. So, I like saying use your words when it's funny, but if it's a state of then either I will say, hey, I've got to go to the bathroom real quick, because it gives them a break, but it's not telling them to go away.
So you'll make it about you, and so they'll have a moment.
That's the hope. You never know.
Does that work on you?
When I'm in a state?
What have you seen people do that's helped you?
What do you mean?
Get to a place where you can use your words.
I try to come at conversations from different perspectives altogether. I have all the words, is my problem.
When other people, like, what have other people done that has helped you get to like a place where you can use your words?
My biggest examples come from work, and that I've usually been the instigator. There have been occasions where someone has visually affirmed that I had no idea what anybody else was talking about. In that case, I didn't know I needed to use my words. I was just going along with what I thought I knew, but they could tell from looking at me that I had no idea. So they would rephrase things for me and indicate that I didn't know what was going on. But once they rephrased, I was like, oh, all right. So that doesn't go along with your question at all. But what about you? Have people done things to help you use your words?
I don't know. I feel like people are usually really triggered by each other. So it's honestly kind of rare that you find someone that's able to calm down while you're not calm. But I think it's really more like when someone's like, are you feeling like this right now? And you're like, and like feel kind of hurt. I think that kind of gets you like, okay, it's okay how I feel. I just need to take a step back. Because if you feel kind of affirmed and or understood, I think it helps you. If you just, I feel like the frustration sometimes is that feeling of not being understood or heard. That's why the frustration builds, because you can't seem to get to a point where you can communicate what you want to communicate because the person you're talking to doesn't understand.
My mind goes in two different directions. We could talk about, we need to recognize that we're not able to use our words. And the other would be recognizing that someone else is struggling to find a way to use their words. But then there's the branch off of nuance, where the other person is struggling to use their words, but they have not noticed that they're struggling. And the same with ourselves. Sometimes we need to use our words, but we're in a frustrated state. So now there are 4 topics.
Someone says, use your words. In my mind, I hear like, you're like all frazzled, and the other like, it's okay, use your words. And that's what I always think of.
The first thing that comes to my mind is something humorous. So do you see already we're on different wavelengths with it, which is why communication is so important.
One thing you did bring up was the definition of words. I feel like today I was having a conversation with someone and I said the word unconditional. Mm-hmm. And I guess to them, there's no such thing as unconditional because everything is with condition.
How interesting.
So like, no matter what I said, the item I was saying was unconditional was conditional. And I was like, I don't even know how to like communicate this now. For example, the word unconditional love to me says that you love someone without condition, meaning regardless of what they do, you still want the best for them. They cannot be in your life and you can still love them. They can do stupid things and you still love them. Versus they were like, well, that's conditional love, because at that point you control what relationship you have with them or something based upon what they do or what they don't do. And I was like at a loss for like trying to understand why their version of unconditional almost seemed very conditional in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. I not being that person, I couldn't tell you what they were thinking, but I already see the inherent trouble with not thinking that unconditional was ever possible, because that means every single time someone sends love to you, it's with a hook. And that would make it very difficult to navigate relationships regardless of life in general, because you cannot consider kindness without a hook. You can't consider love without a hook. You can't consider peace without a hook. That's a very difficult life.
It's not the first time I've heard that, though.
With that person or just in general?
In general.
Really?
It is very common that people don't believe unconditional love exists.
Oh my goodness. That is not the world I live in. Ouch.
I love you, but then you get all these hooks on the I love yous. There's no true unconditional I love you in our society that people, I guess, rampantly talk about. I feel like it's kind of a newer subject that we're starting to be like, hey, why are there all these conditions on love? Why can't we just believe that it is, and so therefore it is?
This is a giant topic.
I guess it goes back to definition. I think because you were like, use your words.
Yeah.
And the definition of words to different people means things. So what do you, when you start a topic, does that mean you have to define what your words mean?
So context matters. Let's pick. Are we picking a workplace? Are we picking relationships? Are we picking general friendships or general public?
Let's do friendships.
Do we have to define everything? So people typically do not choose to, hey, we're starting to talk about this topic. Let's define them. Unless you're working with autistic people and that's their special interest. So I would say no, people do not typically define their words until there's a recognized discrepancy. There is the case that someone may recognize. It seems like we're saying the same words, but we're not ending up in the same place. And so then they'll stop and try and figure out where the miscommunication is. Or they will say, we're using different words, but I think we're on the same page. And that's another case where they might want some definition. I'm trying to think of an example. Do you have any?
Yeah, actually, when I was in Ecuador, it was like after a week, we were all sitting in this room, and mind you, this is in Spanglish, so let me tell you, the complexity was intense. But there was a dean of a college, some kind of engineer, I think it was an environmental engineer, a professor, and a couple other people were there, and they were all having a discussion. Essentially, the discussion had been, you are not a philosopher unless you have a degree in philosophy. Whereas the engineer was like, you're a philosopher if you philosophize about ideas. But can you philosophize if you are not a philosopher? And so we had to go all the way back and they were arguing. And I was like, let's define what a philosopher is first. And they couldn't even agree upon a definition. So the whole argument had been on the definition of a philosopher and not all the other stuff they had gotten to.
That's fun. You asked for this on the level of a friendship. I guess the first thing people need to decide is how much do they care about agreeing or coming to a consensus. Because as friends, we can have different ideas and still be great friends. We can have unresolved disagreement on ideas and still be great friends. So I guess the first question is, how much does this really matter? If it's someone's special interest item, and they really want to connect with the other person, saying, I need you to believe in this definition, is a very direct route and will likely encourage barriers to be built. So, I don't know. It is a fluid ride with many, many variables.
So is the nature of communication just going to be a permanent place where there will often be a disagreement on the definition of words?
It depends. Are you surprised? If there was a hard and fast, this is the preferred way and you should always do this, inevitably it's going to create dissension because it's a confined single way. Now, if you had suggested to someone, you're having difficulties with people and you would prefer to have agreement, that example may give them a good idea to get started But then you're going to have to keep encouraging them to find creative approaches. Because the second they lock it in and they say, this is the way I always do life because this is the way I was taught, they are no longer empowered to live their own life on their own terms. So there's a difference between a guide to give you an idea and a guide that over time becomes the only method, and that's the caution.
But the purpose of communication is giving us a way to socialize with different people. If you can't agree upon definitions, you've kind of ruined the point of having a way to communicate with others. Which
would be fine if the words that we use always had single definitions.
Well, this was fun. Should we wrap it up?
Yeah. Cool.